We started off our journey in medieval Baghdad and made our way east to Damascus. We explored these beautiful lands and described what made them stand out. They were the pillars of trade, commerce and pride for the medieval Arab and Islamic world. Now, we travel to the final major city in the medieval Arab world, the biggest pillar, Cairo.
When we look at Cairo in Egypt, we don't even think about its medieval history, because frankly, it has a great history way before the Middle Ages. Ancient Egypt is often spoken about, the great pyramids we see, or the pharaohs who ruled over this land. What also is vital to mention is that Egypt, especially in the medieval times, had Islamic significance. As we know, Islam spread throughout the Arab world and was the most followed religion in the medieval times. Egypt was the land where the great story of Jacob and Joseph took place, when Joseph was found in a well, then became an important and influential figure within the monarchy that ruled over the land of Masr, whilst he simultaneously revealed his prophecy. Or we can mention the great story of Moses and his challenges against the Pharaoh, where he revealed the great miracles. So all of this added extra significance to Egypt in the Middle Ages. Cairo, as we know it today, is the capital city of Egypt. But in the 10th century, it was an important center of trade. In fact, it became so important that it shifted most of the trade from the Gulf to the Red Sea. But before we talk about some aspects of trade and how it became important in that city, let's have a look at how Cairo received its name. So there are many myths and legends about how Cairo was founded and named. Most relate back to the Fatimid general Jawhar, who founded the city. How he discovered it is where the questions start to rise. One myth argues that the Fatimid ruler Al-Mu'izz told Jawhar to build a walled city named Al-Qahira. And he even said that one day this city would rule the world. We're still waiting for that. Another myth says that it was actually called Al-Mansuriyah before Al-Mu'izz changed its name to Qahira. So the matter of the fact is that there is no established narrative regarding the emergence and the naming of Cairo. Nevertheless, Cairo was not the main cosmopolitan city in Al-Maqdisi's day. We have mentioned him a lot in our previous videos about Baghdad and Damascus. And during his time, Fustat was the main city in Egypt. Cairo was more prominent in Ibn Jubair's time, which we can talk about in a few minutes. But listen to how Al-Maqdisi describes Egypt, and specifically Fustat. He actually puts it in a higher status than medieval Baghdad. He says, and I quote, "It has superseded Baghdad and is the glory of Islam, and is the marketplace for all mankind. It is more sublime than the city of peace. It is the storehouse of the Occident, the entrepot of the Orient, and is crowded with people at the time of the pilgrimage festival." For him to actually put it in a higher position than Baghdad is actually saying something, because Baghdad was the center of Arab power in the early Middle Ages. And therefore Fustat was known for its extravagant baths, its mosques, and even buildings which were about 5 stories tall, and up to 200 people were able to live in those tenements. But what caught Al-Maqdisi's eyes were the influx of ships in the Nile. They would come towards the port of Fustat carrying goods, which leads on to the discussion of trade and how Cairo especially became an important city for trade. So moving on to Cairo now, we'll put Fustat aside. This city was described by Ibn Khaldun as the mother of the world, which is where I think the phrase we often hear in today's times, Masr Dunya, so Egypt is the mother of the world, came from. Cairo was built by the Fatimids and they created it in a square kind of shape. It was surrounded by a high wall with 4 corners, and there were 2 gates at each edge. The streets in Cairo were very narrow, and each street would usually have a dead end, which I'm assuming allowed residents to closely monitor who would be coming and going. They say during the reign of Al-Nasir, the population of Cairo increased by 500,000. So what we can gather is that the personality of Cairo was tall buildings, narrow streets, and it was densely populated. Not too far away from a description of a city nowadays. Cairo, as we mentioned earlier, was also the center of trade. Goods that used to come from China and Asia, whether it be spices or glass, started to come from Cairo. And from Cairo, they would be distributed to the Mediterranean world. So we can see that Cairo became the entry point for most of the commodities that were important to the merchants in the medieval Mediterranean. And because of that, its markets were filled with many goods, which created a vibrant atmosphere in the narrow streets of medieval Cairo. In fact, Egypt and Cairo became one of the wealthiest places in the medieval Arab world. It was a new capital of international trade and culture, surpassing Damascus and Baghdad.
We have finished our journey, but what makes me confused is looking at the Arab world today. I wonder to myself, what happened to the glory where we were once the beacon of commerce, trade and knowledge? All I see now is devastation, countries torn apart by war and resources usurped by the greedy. The civilization which was looked up to by the medieval world and was an example is now looked down upon as a backwards region. I can find no way to express this feeling of sorrow and pain except through a poem once recited by the master of eloquence, Al-Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. And he says, إذا اشتملت على اليأس القلوب وذاق لما به الصدر الرحيم وأوطنت المكاره واستقرت وأرست في أماكنها الخطوب ولم ترى لانكشاف الضر وجها ولا أغنى بحيلته الأريب أتاك على كنوت منك غوث يمن به اللطيف المستجيب وكل الحادثات إذا تناهت فموصول بها فرج قريب.